Hello everybody, Necromancer Kids here once again, this time with an episode of Hidden Attributes Water, where I focus on the less played attributes of Go format and tell you about cards within those attributes that people might not know about or that might have some use in certain decks but haven't been explored very much in my opinion. So for these videos, I don't talk about things that I think are very obviously good cards and that people already play, such as Sinister Serpent and Abyss Soldier and Tribe Infecting Virus, which are very obvious good water monsters. Instead, for these videos, I focus on the less used ones. I just wanted to clarify that because a lot of times people comment like, oh, I can't believe you didn't mention this card. That's usually because I either didn't have the time to, or because I think it's already well known enough that there wasn't really much of a point to talking about it. But anyway, this is the last of the lesser known attributes, and in the future I might make some videos for light and dark, but they will include cards that are very reliant on certain combos to be played and that I don't think people play, rather than, again, highlighting just the good ones. And if nothing else, I might make some for like different kinds of cards, such as ones for trap cards or removal cards or things like that, field cards. Anyway, with that, let's jump right into the video. The first monster that I wanted to talk about from the water attribute is Nightmare Penguin, which is level 4 Aqua, 900, 1800, and its effect is all face-up water monsters you control gain 200 attack, which is only your monsters, so your opponent's Tribe Infecting Virus and Abyss Soldier, etc. is not going to get this bonus. As well, it has the effect of when this card is flipped face-up, target one card your opponent controls and return that target to the hand. I talked about this a lot in my Drowned Goat video, but basically it's not a flip effect, so if your opponent hits this with no win of crossout, it's not going to banish all the copies from your deck. As well, it can target any card the opponent controls, including spells and traps, to potentially be able to get in for attacks on your turn and so on. Ideally, you'd be using that and you flip summon it on your turn, or maybe you get rid of the opponent's Premature Burial that has a key monster out on the field to be able to attack for the win on your turn. You can use Tsukiyomi to loop this card again and again and again and screw over the opponent's set monsters or set spells and traps. In a water-based deck, it helps boost the entire team and can act as an okay beater with 1100 essentially because it boosts itself as well. And while it loses to Blade Knight because it has 1800 defense, a lot of monsters can't get over it, and your opponent isn't always going to have a boosted Blade Knight anyway. Next up, we have the little brother of Nightmare Penguin is Penguin Soldier, level 2 Aqua. This one actually is a flip, but 750, 500. It's very unfortunate that it wasn't a level 1, because I think if it was level 1, this card could have seen some play in goat control decks possibly. Its effect is when it's flipped, you can target up to 2 monsters on the field and return those targets to the hand. I believe in Go format, this is actually the only flip effect that is not mandatory, so that's something interesting to think about, because pretty much everything else you have to activate their effects. Not that it's gonna matter most of the time, but I thought that was interesting. Basically, you can use this card to return your opponent's set monsters or their beaters to get in for some good damage yourself, even if they, like if they're attacking in with 2 monsters, they can really only summon one of them back if they even have to summon that turn. And something you could do with this is flip summon it and then return an opponent's monster, and then return Penguin Soldier itself, and then set Penguin Soldier again, which can be good when you are returning their set monsters again and again and you don't have any other plays to make, kind of stall out the opponent for a while. It's also one of my favorite cards because of its artwork, so that's one reason I wanted to include it. Then we have Yomi Ship. This is one that people probably do actually know a lot about when they play water control decks, but I want to include it anyway because it's not played in, most decks. It's a level 3 Aqua 800-1400 with the effect, if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, destroy the monster that destroyed this card. So it's a worse attribute and more specific Newdoria. So you really only would play it in a deck that uses Mother Grizzly, otherwise you'd probably just play Newdoria, because I believe Newdoria has less defense, but Newdoria has 1200 attack, which in my opinion makes it a lot better. I mean, the only upside to this having more defense is that it walls recruiters, which I guess can be pretty useful if you are in a mirror match, or a match where your opponent has recruiters and you have recruiters, because you'd summon this out of Mother Grizzly. So there is that. Mostly just useful as removal in a deck that uses water monsters. Then I wanted to talk about some of the water monsters that banish cards or remove them from play, as it is known in Go format. There is one that people probably know about, which is Fenrir, level 4 Beast, 1400-1200. Interesting that it's a beast because it can get the piercing effect from Enraged Battle Ox. That's something to consider for a potential deck, but it can't be normal summoned or set. It can only be special summoned by removing 2 water monsters in your graveyard from play, and when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, your opponent skips his or her next draw phase. So it doesn't require for the monster to go to the graveyard, so it does work if you destroy tokens, which I think is when you'd want to play this the most. It could be decent as a side card against goat control to be able to destroy their goats again and again and again and deny them from getting their draw phase, so they don't essentially get free turns because of their goats. And as well, combos with Ojama Trio to cause the opponent to skip some draw phases, so you get essentially a card advantage over turns. And it removes 2, so it can help to fill the banish pile for cards such as Dimension Fusion or Return from a Different Dimension. Very useful in a Watergate style deck, or maybe a Dimension Fusion water aggro deck, which could be interesting. Then there's a lesser version kind of that, which is Aqua Spirit, a level 4 with 1600-1200 Aqua. Also cannot be normal summon or set, but you can special summon it by banishing one water monster from your graveyard. And once per turn during your opponent's standby phase, you can target one phase of monster they control and change its position, and if you do, cannot change the position for the rest of this turn. So that effect usually doesn't really amount to much, but it can have applications, such as in the deck where you'd be playing Fenrir, where you're giving the opponent Ojama tokens. Now you're putting those Ojama tokens in attack mode and making them open to attack for battle damage. And as well, you can do this with scapegoat tokens or monsters that the opponents are trying to wall with, such as Spy, and it can also change things like Jinzo and Monarchs to defense position to be able to run over them on the next turn. The only problem, of course, is that it's a very slow effect. Would be pretty cool if it was just a quick effect that said once per turn you can change the battle position of opponent's monster. I think that would make this card actually pretty good, but as it stands, a bit situational, but useful for removing cards in your graveyard, again for things like Dimension Fusion, and having 1600 attack isn't bad. Then we have up next is Lakunga, which is part of an FTK and OTK strategy. Level 4 plant with 1700-500. Its effect is you can banish 2 water monsters from your graveyard to special summon a Lakunga token, which is level 2, 700-700. Has to be in attack position though. And this is not a once per turn effect, so you can just keep banishing again and again and again. And I believe the FTK strategy is to keep tributing the Lakunga tokens off for Catapult Turtle, which I'll talk about in a minute here, or something similar, and inflicting damage to the opponent to win the game. But also you could just use it to get a bunch of monsters out of your graveyard to remove play, to use Dimension Fusion or Return from a Different Dimension. again, and it has a decent 1700 attack, so it's not a horrible beater card either, even if you end up not using its effect. Then next up, I wanted to talk about an interesting vanilla card, which is Oppressed People. It's a water, level 1, with 400 attack and 2,000 defense. It's very notable because of the 2,000 defense to start, so it'll wall Blade Knights, which are very prominent in the format, and pretty much any normal summon except for Zombira, but your opponent would have to hope that their Zombira didn't already attack over another monster. But it's useful because it's a water, so you can discard it for this soldier as well, and because it is a normal level 1 monster, it is searchable by Emissary of the Afterlife, which has the effect when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, each player adds 1 level 3 or lower normal monster from their deck to their hand. So you would play other targets for this as well, unless you were playing like a more pure water deck, such as Sonic Duck. But if you play Abyss Soldier, one card you want to consider grabbing is Oppressed People to be able to use its effect, or just to be able to wall the opponent if they have monsters that have more than 1700 attack on the field. Then next up, we have some interesting targets for Mother Grizzly, and that you can combo with Creature Swap, which is Amoeba, level 1 Aqua with 300, 350, and when this card you control, the control of this face-up card shifts on the field to your opponent, inflict 2,000 damage to your opponent's life points. This effect can only be used once as long as this card remains face-up on the field. So it is really good with Creature Swap, which you could want to play in a deck already with Mother Grizzly, and plus you can tribute it because it's level 1 for Thousand-Eyes Restrict with Metamorphosis. And in a way, a very strange way, this is proof against things like Brain Control and Snatch Steal for game, because the opponent's going to end up taking 2,000 damage should they try to do that. So against Monarch decks it could be useful, although they do have Soul Exchange. Then another interesting target for Mother Grizzly is Neo Aquamador, which is notable because it's a level 6 and it has 3,000 defense, and only 1,200 attacks. That's why Mother Grizzly can summon it. You would want to play this in a deck that uses Metamorphosis, just like Amoeba, and basically you would get Mother Grizzly to summon a level 6 for you to be able to tribute, and 3,000 defense will wall pretty much every card in the game, including BLS, so the opponent would have to banish it with BLS. But if you're lucky, you can stall out quite a while against warrior decks or decks without lots of removal. In that sense, it's kind of like a spy. Then we have Catapult Turtle, which is a level 5 target for Mother Grizzly, and it has 1,000 attack and 2,000 defense. It's notable also, I'm sure most people actually know what this effect is because of the anime, and because of what I was talking about earlier and the Scientist FTK. Once per turn, you can tribute 1 monster to inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the attributed monster's attack on the field. So, in a way, it's like a Cannon Soldier, except that it relies on the monster's attack points, so if you're attributing stuff like... Sorry, I just realized that this text actually is not correct, because you can use Catapult Turtle's effect more than once per turn. You can use it to either act as a wall with 2,000 defense, which again walls against most things except for like Sork and against Monarch decks. But you can also use it as a finisher in the game, either to tribute off your own Thousand-Eyes Restrict and then be able to get in for some damage with other cards, or to just tribute off your field and inflict damage to the opponent to finish them off when you really need to. Then we have a super niche card that you can summon with Mother Grizzly, which is Metallizing Parasite Lunatite. It is a level 7 with 1000 attack and 500 defense. And this effect pretty much doesn't matter because it's really horrible, but I'll read it anyway. Once per turn, during your main phase, if you control this card in the field, you can equip it to a face-up monster, basically the Union monster effect. While equipped to a monster by this card's effect, that monster will be unaffected by the effects of spell cards controlled by your opponent. And if the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle, destroy this card instead. So very rarely is this effect going to matter, but it is possible. The only reason you'd really be playing this is because it's a level 7 target with Mother Grizzly that you can metamorphosis into something like the Last Warrior or King Dragoon, which I thought was interesting, but I tried it out in my Drowned Goat deck and it just bricked so hard, like even worse than the Neo Aquamador and Catapult Turtle, because at least these have good defense if you draw them and okay effect, but needing 2 tributes for this very niche effect just never worked for me. Next up we have Revival Jam, card most people probably know about but haven't really considered. It is a level 4 Aqua 1500 500. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can pay 1000 life points, special summon it, and face up a defense position during your next turn's standby phase. So the reason that you would play this, it's not the greatest for stalling because it's going to summon in defense mode for 500 defense, so even Sangan can run it over, and then you're just paying 1000 life points to stop from taking damage from Sangan. Doesn't really make much sense. But you would want to combo this with the card Card Safe Return. I've actually tried it out in a zombie deck so that I can have tributes for my zombies and get the effective Card Safe Return. I don't think that's the way you want to play zombies if you're trying to play it competitively, but I found it really fun to play these cards together in a zombie deck. So if you're interested in that, I'd say give it a try. We're starting to get, if you haven't noticed, into really niche cards here. I suppose actually what I want to talk about next is a very interesting side card, which is the Little Swordsman of Ailey, which I believe is how it's pronounced, which is a level 3 warrior with 800 attack, 1300 defense. So level 3 and 800 attack means it can attack under Messenger of Peace and Gravity Bind and level limit area. And its effect is you can offer one monster outside of the field as tribute to increase this monster's attack by 700 till the end of the turn. So what you would want to do is side this in a deck that uses side this against a deck that uses Ojama Trio, so that you can tribute off the tokens that your opponent summons and then have a giant beater to retaliate with that can attack under Gravity Bind and so on. Also, you could use it in a deck that has Scapegoat or something like that, so you can end up just boosting up its attack really high. So it's especially a good side deck card in a goat control deck. Although against burn, you're probably going to want to take the Scapegoats out anyway because they're going to act as a detriment, but something to consider regardless. It's almost like you're using a very expensive one-time United We Stand if you're using with Scapegoat tokens. Then we have Makiyokutai. I think that's how it's pronounced, but I'm not sure. Level 3 water with 900, and during your opponent's turn, when they activate a spell card, you can tribute this card to negate it and destroy that card. I think it's a really good effect, but it's just stuck on a weak attribute with weak stats. If this was like even a 1500 attack monster, I think it would be kind of interesting to play. But unfortunately with its stats, it's kind of not so great. Can't even attack over a Sangan or a defense mode Dekoichi. So unfortunately the stats are what hold it back, I think, more than anything. Although maybe you'd play it in like a tomato deck or Shining Angel deck if it was light or dark. But regardless, this is also one of the materials, by the way, for the Last Warrior from Another Planet. So it could be interesting to play it in a Fusion Gate deck. And then when you summon it back with Dimension Fusion, you have protection from Snatch Steal and such on your opponent's next turn. Also can protect you against some cards like Book of Moon, etc., etc. Then we have, next up is Mermaid Knight. Again, a card probably people know about but don't think too much about. While Umi is face up on the field, it can attack twice each battle phase, and it's a level 4, 1500, 700. So when Umi is on the field, it becomes a level 3 with 1700 attack, which is 1700 double attacker that can get under Gravity Bind and level limit. I think is pretty decent. If nothing else, the 1700 means that it can run over most beat sticks except for Kaiku, Grandmaster Sasuke, and Blade Knight, or Skilled Dark Magician. But other than that, if you get to swing in to attack the opponent's life points, it can be really devastating, or just to attack some of their goat tokens to clear them. A similar card is Amphibious Bugroth Mark III, level 4, 1500, 1300 machine. So that's slightly relevant if you wanted to play a water machine deck with this card. While Umi's on the field, it can attack your opponent's life points directly. Combos really well with Gravity Bind to bind the opponent and just be able to attack them directly turn after turn after turn without them being able to retaliate with their own monsters. And I think that's pretty much the only time that you'd want to play this deck, is if you're running that specific stall strategy with Gravity Bind or Level Limit and Legendary Ocean. Then next up we have Gale Lizard, a level 4 with 1400, 700. With a flip effect, they target one monster your opponent controls and return it to the hand. In a way, it's sort of like a backwards version of Dekoichi, which has 1400 and lets you draw a card when it's flipped. So you're kind of you're still getting the beat stick value, but having less than 1000 defense kind of sucks, because that again means that even Sangan, which is a very common card in the format, can beat over it, and being able to return a monster to the hand isn't as valuable as drawing a card, but it could be good for tempo to return the opponent's set monsters or their tribute monster or chaos monster that they won't be able to summon on their next turn, and hold them back for a couple turns extra. But again, I think that the defense is what kills this card more than anything. Well, as far as a water monster goes, because if it had some okay defense, like if this had 1400 defense even, I think it would be, well, I guess it would literally be twice as good as its defense, but I'd say that as a card, it would be twice or maybe even 3 times as good as it is now. Then we have Jowls of Dark Demise, level 2 Fiend with 200, 100, and it is a flip effect to take control of an opponent's monster to the end of the current turn that the effect is activated, and when the controlled monster attacks, it can attack your opponent's life points directly. So being able to steal the opponent's monster can be really huge, but the problem is that most of the time the opponent is going to attack into this, and then you just activate it and take their monster, and then it goes right back as soon as your own turn is about to start. And unfortunately, it's not level 1, despite having the stats of a level 1, and so there it can kind of falter. But it might be interesting in a Fiend deck, because it is a Fiend monster, so you can try some flip Fiend strategies, because there is a number of good flip Fiends, but the problem is that most of them have really terrible defense, or that they would rather be in attack mode, like Slate Warrior, which is a flip with 1900 attack. But I think that you could build a strategy surrounding this card, and I think, if nothing else, it'd be a lot of fun to run that strategy. Again, I just wish that this card was level 1. If only that, some people might play 1 copy in certain Metamorphosis decks. Next up, I'm actually going to talk about Lord Poison, which is a level 4 plant with 1500 and 1000, and if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, target one plant type monster in your graveyard except Lord Poison and special summon that target. So it's pretty interesting, because it is a plant support monster, but unfortunately in Go format there really aren't that many good plant monsters. The number one plant monster would have to, of course, be Mystic Tomato to search out monsters. So this is a way to recycle your tomatoes in a sense. So you could like run one Lord Poison in a tomato deck. There's also, of course, Homunculus, the Alchemic Being, which is a light monster, level 4 plant with 1800, 1600, with a basically useless effect, but it says once per turn you could change the attribute of this card. Just a quick aside, when I was a kid, I used to think that this effect worked while it's in the graveyard, so I'm like, oh yeah, in my Chaos deck I could turn him into a dark monster and banish him if I wanted to, which that would be actually pretty useful if that were the case, but that isn't the case. Basically, this is a 1800, 1600 vanilla light, which I think are pretty decent stats. It's just 100 less in each from Skilled Dark Magician, which is basically also a vanilla monster, but this is a light attribute, and again, it's a target with Lord Poison. So you could run a Chaos deck that has Mystic Tomato and Homunculus with 1 or 2 copies of Lord Poison to return them from the graveyard. I think that would be pretty interesting to try out. Another plant target would be Prickle Fairy, level 4 plant Earth with 300, 2000. 2000 very relevant to Wall Blade Knight and Berserk Gorilla and everything weaker, and especially because it has the effect, well, the first effect is your opponent cannot attack insect monsters, which is almost never going to come up. You probably don't even want to play this in an insect deck, honestly. It was kind of cool that they had the whole insects and plants synergized, but I don't think it's very practical in Yu-Gi-Oh! They would have had to make the payoffs a lot better. But anyway, that's a tangent. If this card battle a monster at the end of the damage step, change that monster to defense position. So this is a pretty decent wall in that not only will it wall off most normal summon monsters, it'll also kill Berserk Gorillas that attack into it because it won't die to the Berserk Gorilla, and then the opponent's monster is going to change to defense position, so the Berserk Gorilla will destroy itself with its own effect. And in general, changing the monster to defense position is really good against decks like warrior decks, because they usually have like 1000 defense or 700 defense, things like that, and so you can summon your own monster and retaliate back to destroy them. So I think this is a card that has a lot of potential, but I think I might have even talked about it in my Earth Hidden Attributes Earth. So if you want to hear me talk more about it, check out that video. Finally, there's another kind of interesting target that you would use in a plant deck, which is Fairy King Truesdale. This is the highest statted card that Lord Poison can summon. It is a level 6 water plant with 2200 attack, 1500 defense, and while its card's in defense position, all plant monsters gain 500 attack and defense. Unfortunately, that effect is just really terrible. There's not really any plants that payoff's gonna help. I mean, even Lord Poison's only gonna have 2000 attack, and that's less than Fairy King Truesdale. Mystic Tomato is gonna have only 1900 attack. And for Homunculus, it's going to be bigger than Truesdale, but I don't think it's really worth it. I heard that at one point this effect was actually always active, even while it wasn't in defense, but I can't remember if that was a misprint or a mistranslation, or if they eroded it after it came out because they realized it was then better than Summon Skull. It would have been interesting to see what the history of the game would have been like if Fairy King Truesdale worked while in attack mode. It's possible that people might have even played it in the 5Ds era when plants were big, to help boost up the entire team and get in for game. But unfortunately, we don't get to see that future. Then next up we have Legendary Fisherman, level 5 warrior, 1850, 1600. With Legendary Ocean out, it becomes a level 4 normal summon, but while its card is face up on the field, it is unaffected by spell cards and cannot be targeted for attacks, but does not prevent your opponent from attacking directly. So something kind of crappy. is that it's unaffected by spell effects, which includes Legendary Ocean. So while you can normal summon it from the hand, it then becomes a level 5 again, which is mostly doesn't matter too much, but also it doesn't get the attack and defense boost from Legendary Ocean. So it's kind of strange that they designed it with that in mind. It seemed like being unaffected by spell cards was something that they had decided for water monsters, because they also gave it to Deep Sea Warrior and Guardian KS, and I think at least one other water monster, but I can't remember. It does stop you from destroying it with your own spell cards or stopping it from attacking with your own spell cards, and it's immune then to Smashing Ground and things like level limit, but it's very niche. Regardless, I think it's a fun card to play with in a more casual deck, and who knows, maybe someone could figure out a way to abuse this effect and go for that. One more card I wanted to talk about before moving on to something very important is Cure Mermaid, which is a level 4 fish, 1500-800, and as long as this card remains face on the field, increase your life points by 800 during each of your standby phases. I only bring this up for two specific reasons. Like Swordsman of Ailey, you can summon it against burn decks to slightly offset the burn that you're taking, although a lot of times it's just going to get killed, which is the reason that I wouldn't recommend it over Swordsman of Ailey. But it does have the upside that it's still useful even if you are even if the opponent hasn't used Ojama Trio. So there's that as well, and it will become a level 3 under Legendary Ocean to be able to attack under Gravity Bind and level limit. And the final card that I wanted to talk about with you guys today is probably the strongest card in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's in the text of most cards. They had to even change its name, it was so powerful. Frog the Jam. Its name is not Slime Toad. This is wrong. This card was so strong that they had to make an exemption for it in so many cards, because it would be too strong if it affected those cards. Why wouldn't you want a level 2 Aqua with 700 attack and 500 defense? I believe this came out in the McDonald's promos. It's just amazing. Thank you guys very much for watching the video. Let me know if there are any combos or any cards that you think that I missed and that you want to share with everyone else. Let me know if this video inspired you to make a certain deck, or also let me know if there are any suggestions for another video or a deck profile that you would like to see. Thank you very much. Have a great one.